Welcome everyone to this special webinar, helping you prepare for PCST 2023. I'm the president of PCST and my name is Jenni Metcalfe, and we're very pleased to have so many people here from around the world to participate in this webinar to provide some tips on how you might think about proposals for PCST. If people could please mute themselves unless they are actually presenting, that would be good. And I will ask my co-chairs, Marina and Anna, to please mute people who are not talking. We have a panel of 4 people to present today and to give some tips, and then we're very interested to take your questions. On my panel,
you're muted, Jenni.
Jenni, you're muted.
I know, someone muted me. So that's what I meant, do not mute me. That's okay. On our panel, we have 4 panelists. We have Tos Gascoigne, who's the current chair of the Finance and Rules Committee for PCST. We have 3 people from the local organising committee from the Netherlands, and Dijkstra, Lawrence Landeweerd, and Liesbeth de Bakker. Very pleased to have these 4 people here today. So I'm going to turn first of all to Tos, who's going to talk about, he's been involved for many times, to talk about what he considers to be a good proposal. So thank you, Tos. You're muted, Tos.
Oh, yes, thanks. Thanks, Jenni. That sounds fine. Yes, I've been to lots of PCST meetings now since 1994, so one every 2 years since then. Someone else can do the maths. I think that over time, the conferences have got steadily more professional, and steadily we've introduced new formats into them. So now we have discussion sessions, we have rigorously written scientific papers, we have workshops, and there's a list of different formats. So my first bit of advice would be check out all the formats which are published on the web. And that's the first thing, so that you aim your proposal at the best possible format. My second bit of advice would be that all proposals are reviewed by members of the PCST Scientific Committee. Now, members of the Scientific Committee come from around about 14 different countries, and English is not always their first language. So be aware of that and write your proposal in a way which makes it interesting and attractive and easy to read and not too technical and not too much jargon in it, because you'll get a range of different reviewers with a range of different experiences. Some will be practitioners, some will come from a strong theoretical background, and your proposal may be reviewed by 2 practitioners. And if it's too complicated and too theoretical, it may be rejected or passed on. So I will finish there and hand over to the second speaker.
Okay, thank you very much, Tos. I'm going to introduce our second speaker shortly, who's going to speak about interactivity. But before I do, I wanted to say we've quickly grown to almost 70 people here in this webinar, which is fantastic. Don't forget, you've got just a few weeks to get your proposals in. So this is a really wonderful opportunity for you to get your proposals in. If you've got questions that you want to ask our panel, then please put your questions in the chat, and we'll be monitoring that, and we'll be able to take your questions very shortly. But I'd like to hand over to Anne Dijkstra, who's going to speak to us today about interactive formats available on the PCST in making your proposal.
Thank you, Jenni, for giving me the floor. So in addition to what Tos was saying, I already put in the chat the link to the different formats that are possible for proposals. And what I like about the PCST conferences, I've attended a few, not as many as Tos or Jenni, but a few, is that it is the conference is a mix of people from theoretical background, researchers in science communication, journalists and practitioners. And that is always interesting because it's good to think of who your audience can be when you're there. So when I was preparing for tips and hints for more interactive formats, we try to do that as a local organizing committee. I think if you look at the several formats that are possible, some of them allow for more interaction, more participation by your audience, by the people in the room. So those are, for example, the roundtable discussions, the demonstrations, storytellings, or the mini workshops, but also the problem solving and method development workshops and the professional development workshops, and also maybe the performances. Although I would say every type of format allows for a little bit of interaction. So my tips would be is to think of the perspective of your the audience that you expect in your meeting. Because if you do that and you ask them a few questions or you try to engage them, then it becomes more interactive quite easily. And a good question is then to think of what interests them. And probably if I think of my own experiences as a teacher, it is also good to provide some information from yourself. So it shouldn't be probably interaction all or questions from the audience all, unless you are specifically aim for that. But it is good to think of their interest and then include their insights and their experiences in what you are, what your message is. So to conclude, I would say that all formats have some possibility for interaction. And you have to think a little bit of how to control that interaction and how you can get at the same time your message across and bring in input from your audience. So that is where I would leave it.
Sorry. Thank you very much, Anne. And a reminder to everyone, we're now almost up to 80 people on this webinar, which is the most we've had for a very long time on a PCST webinar. I would remind you all that you can make questions in the chat. We'll be monitoring the chat. Each of our speakers has 2 minutes to provide tips. We've heard from 2 so far, Tos Gascoigne and Anne Dijkstra. And I'm very pleased to welcome our 3rd speaker, Laurens Landeweerd, who's going to be talking about the sub-themes of the conference and how you might consider those when you're putting together your proposal. Thank you very much, Lauren.
Thank you, Jenni, for lending me the word. I'll share my screen because I've got several slides that I prepared for your convenience. And thanks indeed for showing up in such large numbers. What I'll try to outline is the general topic that me and my colleagues have been discussing over the past 2 years and have been framing in terms of the different ideas that are behind that topic. So the title that we gave to the PCST 2023 conference is Creating Common Ground. And common ground, as most of you working in science communication probably know, is not a very self-evident thing. Science communication is often boundary work. We aid in creating different collaborations. We do so in many different guises, either as journalists or as science communication experts or as academics. But we do so in many cases to ensure a co-creation of knowledge. And as such, science communication is very much about dialogue, debate, because this is also the only way in which you can enable a societal nurturing ground for critique in the positive and the negative sense on science in its societal role. And as such, science communicators are involved with collaborating with scientists, engineers, policymakers, business leaders, and citizens. And as I said, common ground is not a self-evident thing. And so we thought of not only celebrating the successes of existing common ground, but also looking into the ways in which this can be hampered. And so where are there cases or examples in which common ground may be difficult to achieve or even not be feasible, and in some cases it might not even be desirable. So to be able to help you in steering through this let's say rather large general area of creating common ground, we defined 5 sub-themes, and these sub-themes form the acronym VOICE. The sub-themes are values, openness, inclusiveness, collaboration, and expertise. And I'll say a few things about the different sub-themes so that you are better enabled to see which might fit best with the intended topic that you want to address. In terms of values, one might say that in interactions between scientists and science communicators, as well as other societal actors, there are always different interests and values at play. Different worldviews also impact the type of values that are embraced by specific stakeholders. The question is how, in what way, and to what end. So the notion of values can be a key topic to further explore this. Openness is quite high on the agenda. It has been specifically in Europe due to the open science agenda, but it is a topic of global importance. So we think that it is important to open up the research process by sharing and using all available knowledge through collaborative networks. But openness obviously always also has its limitations. One might think about patent law, for example. One might also think about specific types of research that might pose a danger to the general public. Inclusiveness is a key term that we focused on from the very outset of looking into the PCST 2023. In both science and society, equity, diversity, and inclusion have over the past 10 years become a very central topic in many countries around the world. And such equity, diversity, and inclusion very much focuses on issues related to sex, gender, ableism or non-ableism, cultural and social backgrounds, and it is not always easy to achieve inclusiveness as positive as the ideal might be. Collaboration is the 4th sub-theme that we defined. Obviously, doing your work as a science communicator is not possible without collaboration in all kinds of forms. A specific aspect of such collaboration is let's say, the distinctions between multidisciplinary and transdisciplinary and even interdisciplinary work. Such collaborations often involve a wide variety of participants, which doesn't always make collaboration easier, but it is necessary to be able to co-create different solutions for the complex current social and scientific issues that we are confronted with in the 21st century. The 5th sub-theme is expertise, a notion that has been under critical debate for quite a while now, I suppose, specifically in the science communication area. Based on the expertise of scientists and their research, societal challenges have been defined, solutions have been developed, but how to deal with scientists' loss of authority, credibility, and trustworthiness over the past years. So these 5 themes obviously form the acronym VOICE. You can address these themes through the different abstracts that proposals that you might want to put in. Obviously, there are possibilities to address more than one, but we think that it would be good to prioritize at least one of these different sub-themes in the proposals that you'll deliver on the website. I think I'll wrap it up from here then. Liesbeth is, I think, the next one to. Thank you. I'll stop sharing my screen and make these available afterwards, obviously.
Thank you very much, Lawrence. I noticed that we've already got a number of questions happening in chat. And so before I turn to my next speaker, Liesbeth, I might just address a couple of them so that we keep moving along. One of the questions is the average acceptance rate for proposals. If they are relevant and well written, it's pretty high. We did reject more at the last conference than we have ever before, and they were usually rejected because they were not on the topic of the public communication of science and technology. They were on something to do with education or science and not the public communication of science and technology. We will often ask the people who make the first proposals to modify their proposal and even to change their format. But if they accept those modifications and that change in format, then they will be accepted. Another question is about the size of posters. Once you have a visual talk accepted, and it doesn't have to be a poster, we will send you details of sizes that we may want them to be printed out as, but they may not actually have to be even printed. So I wouldn't worry about that right now. And there's other questions coming in, but let me now turn to our last speaker and keep those questions coming in and we'll answer them all shortly. I'd like to turn to Liesbeth de Bakker, who's going to talk to us about the important aspect of inclusivity. Thank you very much, Liesbeth.
Thank you, Jenny. And I'm going to share my screen as well, which should be shared now. And I hope it does. Do you see my slide?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. Because I don't see it on my screen, I don't know why. It says possible ways to increase inclusivity, right? It's the overview slide. Yeah, great. It's up to me to do a final short presentation for all of you. We've just heard from Tos and Anna and Laurens that it's very important to write your proposal in accessible and good English, so everybody may understand it and see its relevance. We have urged you to make a fit with the best format that you can use. There's a list of different formats that you can choose from for your ideal proposal. And Laurens just explained the big theme of creating common ground and how values and openness and inclusiveness and collaboration and expertise may be part of that. And it's good to make a connection to those things. But this year, for the first time, we also give extra attention to the theme of inclusiveness as a general thing in proposals, because we want to be an inclusive organization and an inclusive conference. And in order to be able to boost that, I will give you some tips and hints to think of whilst writing your proposal. Because in setting up your wonderful plan, you can think of a mix of genders to be included in the roundtable discussion. So men and women and other genders that may be there. Make a mix of those. Also think of a mix of nationalities. Don't stick with the usual suspects, the people who are already well known and are easy to approach. But also make sure that also from other parts, other than the Western world, people are invited to join in the proposal. Then another good tip might be try to bring out a mix of young and old, early career scientists or professionals and more advanced career professionals. It's always good to have this dynamic mix of young and old because there's so much to learn from each other. Also, the PCST has always been this group of people, this network joining the practitioners and the researchers. It's a mixed group. Make sure in your proposals that you mix those groups if it's relevant. Also, we are hoping for a more diverse background of participants in terms of research discipline or in terms of background. You can also think of people with a history and philosophy of science background, or science and technology studies, or more focused on media and communication and journalism, or science policy. That will all work as long as we focus on the core issue of science that we want to deal with and that we want to communicate about. And a final tip might be use other perspectives, look from different perspectives other than the dominant Western world-centered perspective, because that brings out much more new ideas and it can create a very vibrant environment in which we can meet and share information and exchange. And a final tip from me is think whilst you're writing your proposal about a less represented group that you want to be part of your proposal. Who is not yet there that you would long for to be there, and reach out and find them and bring them in. And I think a final thing that I would like to say, a very easy tool to use to do that is just put a request on the PCST mailing list, because that will get out to all the people who are now already in our network and just say, hey, I'm writing this great proposal about environmental communication and how it mixes with science communication. And we could use somebody from the Africas. Who's there? Come and join us, let me know, and we'll make a nice proposal. And that's where I will leave it at. Thank you very much, Jenny, for the time.
Thank you very much, Liesbeth. If you could stop sharing your screen. I'm just going to add our panel to the spotlight. Marina, I think it would be good if you could join us as well. Marina Yobert is the chair of the program committee. So I'm going to ask her to start her video, and I will also share spotlight her, but she's not starting her video. Oh, here she goes.
Yeah.
Okay, add spotlight. Excellent. So we've had a number of other questions come in, and please keep them coming in. One of them is about hybrid attendance at the conference. Now, Marina, I believe that hybrid attendance is possible, but not hybrid sessions or presentations. Do you want to say more about hybrid side of things?
Yes, yes, maybe I can explain quickly what we have in mind. We have called in the presentations, people can submit, you will see in the different formats. Some of them give you the option to propose something online or on site. But we have said that there will be no hybrid sessions. In other words, the sessions will be fully online or fully on site. And we anticipate that the online sessions will be prior to the conference, in the weeks leading up to the conference. And for those who are not able to travel to Rotterdam, we will then do our best to record at least the plenaries, maybe some of them, the key sessions, so that we can make it available to people who register for the online component. But unfortunately, there will not be real-time live, hybrid sessions as such, but there are fully online options and there are fully on-site options. And we will do our best to make available the highlights of the conference afterwards to those who were not able to travel to Rotterdam.
But if you're registered for the conference, you can attend either or both, can't you? I presume.
Yes, you can definitely. If you register, you'll have access to the online sessions that will happen beforehand, and you will. But there will be an option to register for online only, which we will, make clear when the registration time comes. But if you register for the actual conference, if you're planning to travel to Rotterdam, you will certainly have access to the online component and the face-to-face component.
Okay, someone asks whether they should write their proposal towards the overarching theme and then focus in on a specific sub-theme, or if they should go straight to those sub-themes. Lawrence, would you like to answer that, given that you talked about sub-themes?
Yes, thank you. An important question indeed. I'll try to clarify. I think that it is best to focus on a particular sub-theme, because otherwise there won't be sufficient diversity within the conference. And so altogether, these different inputs will obviously or hopefully form a basis to further explore the notion of common ground, but it's the specific sub-themes that should be addressed in an abstract or proposal.
Okay, I have a question for Marina. Do they have to address a sub-theme, Or
Okay.
can they still put in an interesting paper about PCST that may not be specific to a sub-theme?
Yeah. So Jenny, I'm going to give my response, and I invite you or any of the other panel members to maybe comment as well. We did have quite a bit of discussion about this, and I think the consensus is that while the theme is important, the overarching theme as well as these sub-themes, we also recognize that the PCST conference only happens every second year, and it is an opportunity for researchers to present their work, to get input from, from scholars. It's an important milestone for us in practice and scholarship in the field. And therefore, if we're going to expect every single proposal to be fully in line with the theme, we may exclude many proposals. So as far as I'm concerned, and I think as far as the scientific committee is concerned, there's room for proposals that don't directly address the theme. We want to see the theme feature strongly, and it will certainly be prominent in many of the sessions, but it's not an absolute requirement that it must be visibly present and prioritized in every single proposal that we receive. There's room for people to present their research and their practice that may not be so directly related to the theme.
We have a question from Julia Panzer, who asks, is it possible to submit one topic for different formats, say for a workshop and then a shorter one for a demonstration on the same topic? Anne, you've got your hand up.
Yeah, I can answer that because I think it's not recommendable to do the same proposal for two different formats. I would recommend to choose one. And there's also guidelines on how often you can present as a presenter or can moderate a session or be in as a presenter available in the conference. And that is because we would like to allow as many we would like to have as many as possible people to attend, so it's not ideal if one person has 4 presentations. So I think the max is like 2 presentations or 2
it's 2 oral
sessions.
It's 2 oral speaking.
Yeah.
So you can chair a session and that's not considered to be an oral speaking thing. You can put in a visual talk where you may speak, but that's also not considered to be an oral speaking gig. But if you're speaking in an individual paper, a round table discussion, a linked paper, an insight paper, then you are involved in an oral discussion.
Yeah, and I think that's a good thing because we would like more people to attend because then you can learn from more other people.
Toss asked the Dorothy Dijkstra, I think, is what we call in Australia anyway.
That's not going to translate very well.
No, Toss. Anyway, I think he knows the answer, but he's asked a question about whether there'll be pre-conference specialised meetings, for example, for PhD students or teachers. And I think that the plan is that there will be, like in past conferences. Is that correct, Marina?
Yes, so we will obviously be able to answer those questions more fully once we have all the proposals in, but we are certainly planning that in the time leading up to the PCST, to the conference, there'll be some online workshops and online discussions, sort of building momentum and already, presenting some of the content with a focus on the things that can happen online only. And then there is also a pre-conference day, the day immediately prior to the start of the main conference. There will also be some on-site workshops and whatever proposals we feel will best fit into that pre-conference day. So certainly there'll be opportunities for, for example, PhD students in the field, etc., and looking at teaching in the field. So those are some of the topics that are on the table already.
Anna Keel asks, given the debacle over the recent AIDS 2022 visa issue, will PCST be taking additional steps to assess with visa support for those who hope to attend in person from outside of Europe or Northern America? Who would like to answer that from the local organising committee?
Liesbeth, do you want to answer that or shall I answer?
can't unmute my, yes, there I am. And you could say it just as well as I do, but both Anne and I are both in the group that is looking at inclusivity and equity and diversity, and we've taken it upon us as part of the things we are preparing is to get some good visa support going. And we are already in discussion with different parties to make that happen, so we can give people the right assistance when the time comes, and we hope to avoid a debacle. So let's work towards that.
One thing
Yeah,
I would
so
like. Oh, sorry, Anne, you go.
So you can think of concrete kind of criteria or a list what you can do to get your visa approved, and a kind of pre-written letters which can be adapted to get visa to add to your visa applications, for example.
Just before we go to the next question, I would like to emphasise that the PCST Program Committee and Local Organising Committee are extremely keen to support delegates from developing countries. And we're looking at arrangements to provide that support. So if you're concerned you do not have the resources, please put in a proposal, because there will be opportunities that become available. Andrea George, or George Andrea, I'm not sure, I'm sorry, asked Marina if they don't address a sub-theme, they still need to choose one when they put in their proposals. So what should they do?
Okay, so I think my response to that would be, you would have seen from Lawrence's presentation that the sub-themes are very, very broad. I mean, keeping in mind something like giving a voice, you know, the last one, the E is for expertise. So I think it would be possible for, it would be hard for me to think of a topic that cannot relate to one of those sub-themes. So I would choose the one that I would regard to be the most relevant. But what I'm trying to say is that you won't be penalized in the review process if you don't, you know, explicitly elaborate on the sub-theme. That I want to make clear. It will count in your favor for some of the sections where we want to focus on that, and that will help us to group them more, you know, more intelligently. But if you do not elaborate or specifically respond to a sub-theme, it's not going to count against you. And I'm sure that you will find one of the sub-themes that you could say, okay, this would be, if I have to choose one, this would be the most relevant one.
Yeah. Carlo Gubitosa says, the question is actually about the conference itself and about opportunities and spaces for networking, informal exchanges, contact sharing, and searching for partners for new research projects. Well, as the chair of the two previous conferences, to me, that's one of the most important things. So I'm sure that Marina and our local organising committee are very cognizant of that. And I see them nodding, but I'm going to ask Marina, and then I'll go to Liesbeth, who's nodding very vigorously. So Marina first.
Well, I could just say to Carlo, thank you for highlighting the need and the expectation of the delegates. It's very, very good for us to be reminded of that. And we will certainly do our best. We all know that while the sessions can be amazing, a lot of the value of a conference comes from the networking and the people you meet and the new ideas that are generated. So we will do our best to build in as many opportunities for that as possible.
And maybe I can add to that.
Yes, thank you, Liesbeth.
Yeah, if I would like to add to what Marina's just said, is that this time we are also focusing a bit more on the interactive sessions, where there's much more space to get to know the others as well and to work together on topics that we get. For instance, in the roundtable discussions, we get the papers presented, the issues discussed, and then we can do a little bit of hands-on work together, maybe in a mini workshop or whatever. So that gives opportunity for people to get to know each other better. Then we are working and planning towards also a social program. So things outside the conference and during the conference, where you can meet like-minded people interested in the same things. And meanwhile, the building where we will be, the Doelen, is also set up in such a way that there will be corners and pockets and areas where people can come together and chat with each other. Yeah, there will be plenty of opportunity to network and to, well, make things happen and set up context for later on. Thank you.
Keep those questions coming in. We're almost to the end of the ones that are in the chat, so I'd like to have some more, although I will keep asking questions if no one else does. I'm actually going to ask Tos, who's probably of our panel reviewed the most papers over the most number of years, what it is that really leaps out at him shortly as being a good proposal. But before I do, Alice asks about whether the committee will put together various proposals that seem to link together into a joint session. And yes, that is exactly what we do to individual papers and to the insight papers. We try to put them together into a session where they naturally link with each other. But can I say that some of the best sessions are those that are complete in themselves. So the round table session where you need 4 speakers and 1 or 2 chairs, and the linked papers session where you have five papers that are curated and which come together into a session to form the whole session itself. And the reason they work so well together is that there's communication about those sessions before they even happen. And if you're worried about finding people, use the PCST list, use our Facebook site. And if you're not a member of PCST, which I imagine a lot of you aren't, please become a member. You will get a discount in your conference registration, which will more or less cover your conference fees. And you will get other benefits that will be becoming much more obvious in coming months, including attending webinars that are only open to members. So please make sure that if you're not already a member, that you think about joining as a member to our PCST community. I'm personally concerned about the fact that we have 10 times as many financial members who are on our Facebook site, on our PCST list, and on our Twitter feed, but they're not members of our community. It's not expensive and it covers for 2 years. So I would really urge you to become members and become more committed to our community. Okay, Tos, back to my question for you. What is it that makes you stand up and look excited when you're reading through proposals, and you've done many hundreds, if not thousands, of reviews?
Yeah, I think the first thing to remember about assessing proposals is that every member of the PCST Scientific Committee will be sent about 50 proposals to look at. And looking at a proposal properly and understanding it is quite a job. And so I think that one of the things you can do in order to assist people who are judging proposals and are going to score them on a 1 to 5 scale, 5 being high, 1 being low, is to make sure that they're accessible, that they contain your ideas as simply as possible, that they have a good catchy headline, that they emphasize what's new, what's interesting, what's lively about the particular work you want to discuss, and why it might be useful to the people in the PCST network. I'm always looking for ideas which are original, which are going to advance science communication. In some ways, I think we are presented with an opportunity at this conference because the world has been consumed over the last couple of years by, I think, 2 really big issues, international issues, and one is COVID and the other is climate change. And both of those are heavily science-based issues. And I think this presents a challenge to us as science communicators and also an opportunity. So I'd be particularly interested in people who can take us forward, take us above the exchanges that we've been having to date, and advance our thinking, move to the next level, because I think we do have to move to the next level. We don't have sufficient impact with policymakers, with politicians, and I think that that's the next challenge for us. So in summary, straightforward language, a good heading, something original, perhaps something provocative, something which is going to take science communication onto the next level. So they'd be my 5 top suggestions as far as an attractive proposal is concerned.
Okay, Guoyan Wang from China asked, is newly accepted or newly published papers allowed to be a proposal for a PCST conference? That's a good question. Who wants to have a go at answering that?
Well, yes, I think it is. I think it's quite legitimate. There are so many journals now which are publishing papers on science communication and no one reads them all. So if you've got a new idea and you've documented it and you've published it, I think that's an entirely suitable topic. And you might want to expand beyond the paper by having a discussion session or by inviting other people from other countries to join with you in terms of talking about it. And I think having multinational perspectives is, again, a very attractive thing to reviewers. So if you can involve people from outside your own country, that's a good thing to do.
Okay, before I go to Anne to also respond to that question, I think it's also a really good forum to test some of your research ideas, your research progress. I know that I have tested how I'm progressing in a particular research topic at successive PCST conferences before I publish. And I think it's a wonderful forum for that, for getting feedback to your ongoing research. But Anne.
Yeah, I would like to add there, because there's also the time between September when you submit your proposal and April when you have your conference. So it is possible that sometimes papers are accepted and published even in that period of time. But I think it's also good, even if you have a new paper, that you can then open it more for discussion or further exploration for something like that. I think there's also one, maybe I take the opportunity, there's one question still left, which was also about if it is appreciated by Petra, if it's appreciated to submit the same topic on different formats to demonstrate the flexibility. I would discourage that. I would submit one proposal on one topic and choose one format. And if we think it's better in another format, then the scientific committee can give advice on combining with other proposals. But if you do the same format, then it's rather more work for the committee.
And yes, I would actually say that the most common reason that we ask you to modify your proposal is usually to change the format. You might have put down an individual paper and we might have suggested, no, we think this would be a better visual presentation or an insight talk. So that's something to consider. Another thing that you might like to think about is that the most common proposal we get is an individual paper. So that's the most competitive. So you might look at some of the other formats so that where you might have more of a chance, because individual papers are so competitive. Having said that, we do allow plenty of space for them, but it is very competitive in that space, more so than in the other formats. Now, Marina, I wanted to ask you a question before going back to some of the other questions that are coming up. And that is about this whole theory practice bridge that PCST tries to achieve. And I think it fits very well also within the theme of a common ground, this how we get practitioners and scholars together. Is that something that you look for when you look at proposals?
Jenny, yes, as you know, creating bridges and making connections between researchers and practitioners, that's a golden thread for us in the PCST network and also in our conferences. I want to add to that, though, that there's room for research, purely research papers, and there's room for purely practice insight. And we will always allow room for those that are purely in the one, at the one end of the spectrum or the other end of the spectrum. But if you can find a way of, in a session with multiple speakers, to bring a practice and a research perspective together and to invite your audience to brainstorm ideas and to interact, that will certainly be a plus in terms of what we're looking for. So it's not a question of the one or the other. I think it's both. They can be purely research or practice, or they can combine. But we absolutely support the idea of building those bridges and creating connections. And we hope that people will go away from the conference with new ideas for research and practice where, practitioners and researchers work together. That's certainly one of the things we aim to achieve.
Thank you. Well, Petra Nickchen said that she would look at other formats as she's a practitioner, not a scholar. So what are the opportunities for people who are practitioners without wearing that scholar hat? What are the opportunities? Marina, you want to have a go? Anyone else?
I don't have the list of formats open in front of me now, but certainly, many of them allow practitioners to share best practice, to share ideas from what they've done as practitioners. It does not have to be research only, or you can join forces with researchers and do a joint session. But we want to create space for practitioners to share their learning, to share their experiences, but also to put on the table their needs so that researchers can take notice.
Okay.
I have the list open.
Just while Anne's getting that open, can I say that I consider myself mostly to be a practitioner, and I think I could put a proposal in any of the formats, just about practice. So don't feel like that you're limited just to a few formats if you're a practitioner. Anne.
Yeah, actually, that would more or less be my answer, because I have the list open, and I thought maybe individual papers are considered mostly done by academics, but I think all the other formats at least allow for practitioner input or a practitioner's perspective. So I think if you look at the formats, there's many possibilities.
Yeah, no, I agree. Lauren Murphy asks, do the linked papers format require us to find the other research and practice reflections to present together, or can we submit a proposal that then gets matched? No, in the linked paper thing, we require you to identify the 5 speakers. They don't have to be a mix of practice and research. They could be in one area. For me, the more important thing is that they should represent different geographic and cultural contexts. But they could all be about research, or they could all be about practice, but they should present those different cultural contexts. Okay, we've got about 12 minutes left, and we don't have any more questions coming in. So I might just go around the room to wrap this up, and if any come in, I'll also add those to the discussion. But in terms of what you think you would like people to think about, in how many days left have they got to submit? How many days left?
Well, the closing date is 7 September, so that means that we've got roughly 3 weeks left. I didn't count the days exactly, but it's not long. We know from experience that people usually wait until the last week or even the last day or two. If there's any technical problems, we will be a little bit flexible on the deadline, but we encourage you to submit it a few days ahead of the deadline, just to avoid technical problems. But contact us if you experience any problems, and we are there to help. We don't want to exclude anybody that really wants to submit a proposal.
And thank
you. Exactly
and tells
3 weeks.
me it's exactly 3 weeks. So this time in 3 weeks, you should have submitted your proposals. Now, one point I wanted to make before I go around the group to get their final messages about proposal submissions is that you can submit more than like 2 or the two maximum oral papers that you want to present in. But if you get all of your proposals accepted, you will then need to choose which ones you don't do. So just be aware of that, that you have a maximum of 2 oral speaking spots. You can put in as many proposals as you like, but if you get them all accepted, you'll have to then make that choice when it comes down to it. So be conscious of that, particularly if you've agreed to join someone else's proposal for a round table or a linked paper session, and you've got other things you'd rather present about, then you might suggest that they get someone else.
And Jenny, if you don't mind, if I can maybe just add to that, I know you've said it, but just I know people sometimes don't understand this 100%. You can still be a non-speaking co-author on another paper, on more than 2. In other words, if you're already speaking on 2, there could be a 3rd or a 4th paper where you're not presenting, but maybe you were a supervisor of a student, and so your name is listed on that proposal, but you won't actually be speaking, and that's fine. And there's no limit to that. It's only a limit of 2 speaking engagements, if I can call it that.
And the formats that we have try to maximize the discussion. So if you're a co-author, you should go to those sessions and really participate in the discussion side of it. So every session we try to maximize discussion, particularly in the roundtable sessions, but every session. So please participate in those discussion sessions. So let me go around the room, and I'm going to start with Lawrence shortly to say what he thinks the top tip that he would like to leave people thinking about as they prepare their proposals. So Lawrence, what's your top tip?
Sure. The one thing that popped into my mind when you suggested this was so a topic like, or a theme like creating common ground seems to invite for success stories. But I would like to emphasize that it should be really interesting to look also at the cases in which different perspectives prove to be incompatible, or cases in which communication is very difficult to achieve, or even impossible, because these are the situations that you find in real life, and at the same time the situations that you learn a lot from.
Excellent point, Lawrence. Toss.
Okay, I'm going to talk about possible support for people coming from lower income countries. And so PCST is currently in negotiation with one of the foundations in the United States about them providing some funding which would support the travel costs and the accommodation and registration fees of people coming from lower income countries. And so we hope to make an announcement about this in the next 10 days or so. And the reason I mention it now, I'd rather wait until it was all signed, sealed and delivered before announcing it. It's quite a cumbersome process to go through. And the reason I'm mentioning it now is because I'd encourage people from the lower income countries, and essentially they're the countries where people pay a lower joining fee to PCST to become a member, and they're all listed on our website. The reason I'm mentioning it now is because I'd encourage people from those countries to submit a proposal, knowing there is quite a good possibility that we will be offering scholarship funding to help you attend the meetings themselves. Now, it's not a promise, but it's a reasonable possibility.
Thank you very much, Toss. Marina.
Okay, so I think my tip would be, even though I didn't really prepare for this, but on the spot, I would say, ask yourself when you go to a conference, what are the things that attract you? If you look at 5 parallel sessions, what will make you decide which one to go to? Something that stands out, something that's unusual, something that's catchy, that's really relevant and timely and a little bit creative and unusual. Because if you can have that in your proposal, you know, that will carry through to your actual session at the conference and on the conference program. So I always try to put myself in the shoes of if I was a delegate, you know, and this was on the program, would I want to go there? And obviously, you know, proposals are for different audiences and different topics, you know, may generate interest from different audiences, but just try to think of what would really catch your attention, what would make you sit up and take notice, and try and write it in a way like that, so that it will also make the reviewers sit up and take notice, and it will carry through to an innovative and interesting, unusual kind of creative approach in the way you write it. And this can be for research or for practice, or for a combination of both. Just try and be a little bit innovative and creative in the way you present it.
Thank you, Marina. Liesbeth.
Yes, sorry, I had to switch on my microphone. I want to capitalize on some of the things that were said this hour. I would definitely encourage all the newcomers and all the people who want to become part of our network and join us either online or hopefully also physically in Rotterdam to pluck up courage and to take the advice to heart that we've given you today. If you don't have the network yet, but we're very eager to welcome you on board, but you have to get yourself known, and that goes through the PCST Network mailing list. Just put your question there, and of course that requires you to become a member. Try and make that effort and do it, because I think it will really make it all worthwhile for you. Just to give you a little bit of inspiration, in the past weeks, I have seen several or have been contacted by people that I met, came to know at previous conferences, both from the field of practitioners who've said to me, I've put a message out on the mailing list asking for the one person that we needed to do a linked paper, and we found this person, which is great. But also people who just came and asked me, well, you know, I'm in the process of doing a proposal with the usual suspects. What would you advise to be a bit more creative, a bit more new? So I also advise them to reach out to those partners that we don't know yet, but that we would like to bring in. So feel welcome and come and join us.
Thank you very much, Liesbeth. Anne.
Yeah, thank you. Maybe to add to all the maybe overwhelming information already, I would suggest to focus on one thing, is how you can contribute to the science communication insights, either theoretically or practically. And if you do that, that I think is the main aim of the conference. So everything else you can do, but I think that is most important.
Thank you very much to our panel. And can I conclude by saying that I have not missed a conference since I went to my first one in Montreal in 1994. And it has fundamentally changed my life, both professionally and personally. So I would encourage you, if you've never been to a conference, put in a proposal, come along in person or virtually and join our community. We would love to have you there. So thank you, everyone. Good evening, good morning, good afternoon, and best wishes to everybody in the future for your proposals and getting them in within the next 3 weeks. I've got a few to write as well. So sharpen those pencils, those laptops, and get moving. So thank you, everyone. Thank you to our panel for an important and dynamic session.
Thank you all.
Thanks, Jenny.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Great to hear of all the support and commitment of the local organising committee. I think this has been the strongest local organising committee in my experience, and so it's terrific that you've taken the time and to think about things and so well in advance of the committee, and I think it'll add immeasurably to the strength and the cohesion of what we're going to get in Rotterdam next year.
Thank you very much, Tos.
The other thing I meant to say sometime today was what a terrific venue you guys have organised. It was lovely seeing the venue when we had that meeting in Rotterdam, and the city of Rotterdam itself is so interesting, all that new architecture that's going on. I think it's a fabulous town, and people do make decisions on these matters, good eating, good seating, good buildings. So I think maybe you could put 5 top tips on best places to eat in Rotterdam, or 5 buildings you must see while you're there.
We'll work on it.
Yeah, good on you. All right. Well, thanks, guys. Lovely to
Thanks,
work with you
everyone.
on this.
Okay.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.